There is something intrinsically captivating about the horse. Then, when you add to the fact that this animal is wild and free, it engenders in people a sense of what freedom is all about. In the 1800s in North America, wild horses roamed in the millions and millions. They stretched all the way from the southernmost American border with Mexico into Canada, the prairies, Saskatchewan, Alberta, British Columbia. They were initially shot for sport throughout the 1900s, and then, come World War I, they began to be captured by the tens of thousands in order to fuel and feed the dogs and cats of America. That's when the pet food industry began, and hundreds and hundreds of thousands, eventually millions, went into pet food cans. Wild Horse Annie was actually Velma Johnston. She was a secretary in Reno, Nevada, born in 1912. She was quite disfigured from polio, so much so that people would look at her face and be kind of shocked initially. But once she opened her mouth and that powerful intellect of hers was let loose, people immediately saw that she was a woman to be reckoned with. And certainly the government and ranchers found that out as the years went by. When Velma came on the scene, wild horses were being captured in the thousands with the use of airborne pursuit. And what would happen is planes would take off and they would head into the mountains where the horses hid out, and they would harry them down onto the flatter grounds where men in trucks could chase them. They were lassoed, and the lassos were attached to very heavy tires, which soon brought them to a standstill. They were shot at to slow them down. Often they were hamstrung, which means shooting across the back of their legs. Their eyes were shot out, and in many cases, captured horses had barbed wire strung through their noses to restrict their breathing so that they would be more docile. It was a really brutal thing. Between 1925 and 1950, that quarter of a century, the estimates are that something in the neighborhood of 1.5 million to as many as 2 million horses were slaughtered in the United States and Canada. Velma grew up with wild horses, but she had no idea about what was happening to them until one fateful day in 1950, when she happened to be following a livestock truck en route to a rendering plant and noticed blood pouring down the back of it. And she informed the driver when the truck stopped that he had livestock down, and she assumed it was cattle. And she was horrified to discover that not only was the truck crammed full of Mustangs, but the Mustangs were brutalized in the most appalling fashion. And when she looked at that, her first thought was not saving wild horses in the United States and Canada. Her first thought was how to stop the brutality. Once Velma realized that the problem existed right across the western United States and Canada, she knew she had to get political. So she started a campaign of trying to organize not only ordinary citizens, but also politicians to get on the side of saving the wild horses. It was a real uphill battle because she immediately was at loggerheads with some of the big ranching interests. The big ranchers wanted all the public land for themselves, and of course, the rendering plants in both Canada and the United States were doing a pretty good business putting these horses into pet food cans. So she had to battle these special interests who had a lot more power than a middle-aged secretary from Reno. A lot of people think of Velma Johnston as the woman who saved wild horses. And that's true. They exist today because of her campaign. However, I think what's more important about Velma Johnston is that she demonstrated what so many people forget. One person can make a difference. No matter how significant the odds are against you, one person standing up and making a lot of noise for a long time can change things.